Hello, beautiful non-persons. I'm Russ Rapp, and welcome to the peace of what is. So in this video, I'm going to get into non-duality and probably shatter all the lies that you believe about it, because really there's ultimately one truth about non-duality, and you're going to find it right here. You're probably asking yourself, who is this Russ Rapp guy that claims to know the ultimate truth about non-duality? Well, let me tell you, I'm a guy that's standing here in front of a tripod, talking into the camera of an iPhone in a park. There's a river flowing behind me. I walked over here on some railroad tracks, and the whole way I was thinking, I was thinking, what do I want to say in this video? What kind of topics, what kind of ideas do I want to bring? And I had a lot of good ideas, but typically what happens, I get in front of the camera and it doesn't always come out the way that I anticipated, but that's how life is. It's always live. We're always just dealing with this present moment that doesn't exist in the moment. And I don't have a giant following of people that come out to the park and are watching me give this, enlightened speech. I don't have a ton of subscribers on YouTube, but if you'd like to subscribe, if you haven't, I would ask you to please subscribe. I don't have a non-duality card that I carry in my wallet. I haven't passed a class or taken some course. I've read some books, I've watched a bunch of videos, but ultimately I'm just a person that understands non-duality in the same way that you understand non-duality. And if you don't know the concept, it's really easy. It means not two. So whenever there seems to be dualism, two, non-duality is saying, hey, there's not two. And so the way we think is all in separation, in self versus other, in, out, up, down, all those types of terms that we use because our identity as a separate self sees things dualistically. But the better question you want to ask yourself is not who this Russ Rapp guy is, because you can find the truth of non-duality yourself. What you should be asking yourself is, what do I believe, or what do you believe about non-duality? Because if there's anything outside of the idea that it means not two, then it's just ultimately a belief. And I think if you're coming to non-duality to change something or to grow or to become a better person, then you're going in the wrong direction. I'm standing up for this one so I can get a little bit more into it. But so as humans or anything in life, we're all in a process of growth. We go through stages as individuals, from childhood into adulthood. Culturally, we grow through levels of development as humans, as a group. And what happens is when one era or one level of development changes into something that's new, part of what came before gets let go or torn away or changed in order to bring in the new way of thinking, the new way of doing things. And so to some extent you have to let go of what happens in the past. But what can happen in growth is that people see the new era as this great new bright shiny object, and they look at the past as this dirty, gross, dark ages thing that they just don't want anything to do with. And so they end up attacking what came before. But anytime you have growth, it's a process of transcending and including. And Ken Wilber gets into this a lot. If you want to read some of his books, Brief History of Everything, Ken Wilber. But essentially, you're growing, but you're including those parts of the past that are the beneficial and positive parts. But sometimes through growth, you end up bringing in parts from the past that are the negative parts, or you don't really see it in the correct light. And so anytime you have stages of change, and I think right now we're going through a huge shift in human consciousness. Anytime you have a shift in the population seeing the world in a different way, sometimes they can look back into the past or revert back to what has happened before and pull in those things that are negative, because that's something that's known. And the reason I bring this up is because non-duality is, in a sense, a destroyer. It destroys everything that has happened before. And so in that process of growth, you're taking away, letting go all that has happened before in order to usher in the new. And so to some extent, it's a process of destruction destructing the old ways. And so, but non-duality is the ultimate destroyer. And what I mean by that is it destroys everything. and I feel like, right now in the shift that we're going through, we want to destroy everything that's happened in the past, whether it's, if you look at postmodernism, it's attacking modernism, it's attacking rationality, reason, individuality, absolute. And so postmodernism comes in and says, hey, everything's relative. Whatever you believe, there's always bias. There's always a piece of truth, but all of it's biased because it's coming from a flawed individual. And so everything is really relative on your perspective. So in this sense, like, I can say what I believe non-duality is, but that's relative because whatever you believe has truth too. And it's really, my truth. Like today, everyone talks about my truth. It's like, okay, well, yeah, there is some level of my truth and relativism. But the ironic part is that when you're talking this idea that everything is relative, nothing is absolute, that in itself is an absolute statement. It's absolutist, saying that everything's relative. And so what non-duality does, so postmodernism wants to destroy those old institutions that have come before, instead of trying to find the benefit or the good parts of those institutions. It wants to destroy it all to bring in some new relativistic model. But what non-duality says is it wants to destroy everything. and by what I mean by that is it destroys even the idea of destruction. The idea that you have to destroy something, you have to change, you have to grow. It destroys that idea. And so the paradoxical part of that is that it destroys nothing. And so non-duality isn't asking for anything. It isn't asking for you to change. It's not wanting to do anything. It's the truth of what is in every moment. And if you're wanting to find some ultimate peace where nothing in your perceivably happens in your life that's a negative, or you end up, accepting everything that happens in your life and you never get angry because everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Is that right? So if that's what you want to get out of non-duality, that's fine, but that's not what non-duality is pointing to. It's saying that all these ideas of dualism, all these ideas of what happened before and the future, and changing and growing and developing and using non-duality as a tool to somehow become a better person, or realize that we're all equal. And so if you're using it for some idea of equality, that's not what it's talking about. Because ultimately, the basis of non-duality applies to everything, but it applies to nothing. And so this idea that we're all one, we're all spiritual beings that are all part of a collective, that we're all equal, that's true, but at the same time it's not true. And so that in itself is a duality. So non-duality is the basis of that freedom, but as human beings, we go through this process of not believing it, because really the ultimate story, if you will, that we have as human beings is not that we were born, that we live, and that we die. It's that we believe the story and then we don't believe it. So like we go through an illusion And I had this mapped out in my head a little bit better, but essentially, like, life is what it is, and then we believe it's something different, and then we don't. That's not much of a story, but that's kind of the point. And so it's not, so when you understand non-duality, meaning not two, this idea of life itself kind of goes away, because the idea of life is that there is death. And so if you believe non-duality is going to bring you some ultimate Valhalla or some enlightened state, and if we all do it, it's going to be a better world, then you're just believing in death. You're just believing in change, essentially. And obviously everything changes in every moment, but it doesn't change, if that makes any sense. And so non-duality is kind of pointing to the idea of absolutism, the absolute. And the reason why it does is because that's the opposite of the relative. That's the opposite of change, of separation. And for the mind never believes in the absolute, because it can't. It can only kind of guess at it. But the absolute is here in all things, in all moments. And so that's where what non-duality is pointing to. So it's great if you want to watch videos where it makes you feel good. It gives you some insight. I'm hoping you get some insight from this video, but ultimately that is a distraction from what the message of non-duality. And if you want to continue to watch my videos, I really appreciate it, because I enjoy communicating with people in this stage of life, or whatever you want to call it. If you have any questions, leave some in the comments, or if you have any thoughts on what I just said. Nothing in life turns out how you expect. You can control some of that, you can make things happen, you can set goals, but ultimately life's going to play out how it does. And so whether or not you release that control, whether or not you say, I'm going to let go of trying to control the outcome and fighting against what's happening, whether or not you do that, the ultimate truth of non-duality, of not to, is always there. And so whether you fall from the path of righteousness, whether you skin your knee, the healing, the forgiveness is always there. So it's not up to you to destroy your illusions, to use or let go of your illusions. But that's the peace, that's the beauty. It's not peace as this is a peaceful moment. I enjoy the fact that I'm the only one standing out here. The sun's coming up. It's quiet other than nature sounds. You got the peaceful river. That's exciting, but later on in my life, hopefully if I continue on living, there'll be situations where it's not going to be like this. And so if you watch these videos and you feel this sense of inner peace, know that it's fleeting. Know that that's not the message of non-duality. The peace is always there. And so when you're in those moments of stress, of struggle, there is peace that you can find in those moments. And it may not seem to it from your own perspective, but even in a raging ocean or a volcano, there's peace in that chaos. Even in riots, looting, all the negative stuff that's happening out there, there's ultimately that peace in knowing that the truth of non-duality, knowing that connection with everything. So I'll leave you with that. I'm sure I missed half the stuff I wanted to say, but like I said, subscribe, leave a comment, and until next time, or right now, right now, I bid you peace.